What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment. Love to have some Q&A with you guys. I did make a mistake on one of my last videos. My email, so if you want to, ask me any questions direct, maybe you're a farmer, you just like a little bit of advice. I have helped with stuff like that before. Uh, my email is going to be hippieorganics@yahoo.com, not hippieorganics.com. So, yeah, we're not an official anything. It's just a little bit of an email if anyone needs help. Maybe you're having a unique situation. Because if I can't figure it out, I will find somebody who can and get you the help you need best I can. So today, this video or at least for this video, we're gonna go ahead and doing some canning and food preservation. Now, if you haven't seen my last video about rotational cropping, stop this video, go check that out because this one will make more sense with that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into this. Now, canning is essentially jarring, and it's where you take a jar and of some food that you intend to preserve with the proper mixes. Some of it has to be acidic, some of it doesn't. We'll get into all that here in a little bit. But basically, it's where you take this said food in a jar. You barely snug up the lid on the mason jar, and basically you dunk it in a boiling. This is just a very fast explanation. Please don't do this. You'll probably break your jars and cause some glass in your food. But anyways, you dunk it in some boiling water, and for a certain time frame, it forces all of the air to vacate the jar. And again, we'll get all the details in a little bit. And after that, you basically let it cool, and you have preserved food. That is a very traditional method of preservation, but there's a lot of different preservations outside of just canning or jarring you can follow, and maybe it'll actually suit you a little bit more, be a little bit more obtainable for you in your schedule or just financial strain, whatever it may be. So first off, in terms of jarring, is it efficient? Yes. There are things we jar. I jar jellies. We jar like different types of jam. Of course, you have to jar pickles. But I actually do a lot of other preservations. So it's more of like our first step in food preservation. Think of jarring more like a wet food that we would need to store. A lot of people would generally at this point either split from and go like towards a jarring canning route, or they tend to go towards more of like a freeze dried. But that costs a lot, so we're not exactly trying to do that right now. You can jar meats and things like that. Generally, you have to watch the acidity. And again, there are effective. Most of these things will last a year or more. In terms of how jarring works, basically what you do is you cook up your food. For you to jar, you're gonna heat it up, and while you're cooking it, making whatever mix you're doing or whatever you're gonna be preserving. So, like if I'm making jelly, I got to heat the water to a certain temperature, mix in the pectin, which actually you can make out of apples. We're hoping to maybe do a video on that later on once we can get apples, see how that works. You got to process, make your jelly. While you're making your jelly, you'll take your canning pot and lids off, rings off, and jars open. You place all of that into the pot and you bring the pot to a boil. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to preheat it so that way everything jars correctly. You don't have any broken glass, no cracks. And it just helps take the headache out as well. So then you take your now hot jars, you place them on a towel, empty. You just kind of take them out. A lot of canning, systems, they actually have like a stick with a magnet, so you could just kind of pull everything out. And they also have like a jar grabber, so you can pull all that out without burning yourself. If you don't have that, you can use like a coat hanger and some spoons and stuff, and like some tongs. I've seen that done before. But anyways, basically you take your hot jars and you fill it with your now hot substance, and you tighten the lid. Now you're not going to secure the lid all the way. All you do is just hand tighten it. Just turn until it stops. Um, like if I'm holding the ring for the mason jar with this hand, I'm only holding it enough to physically keep the ring in the air, if that makes sense. As soon as I turn the jar, so with this hand I'll be turning my jar. As soon as I turn the jar and it catches on that ring, stop turning. You don't want it tight. And the reason is because you're going to now take that entirely hot mason jar that's been filled, and you're going to place it back in the hot water. And the reason is it's already hot, and you're going to continue to heat it to a certain degree. Now, those of you that know basic science, when you take a certain molecule or element and heat it, whether it be gas, water, really just anything, a coffee, anything liquid, the molecules when you heat it will expand, and they will become airborne, so to speak. They're very gaseous. They're going to turn into a gas. And when that happens in the jar, because you didn't tighten it all the way, that excess gas will leave the jar. So whenever you take it, your jar's out. Once the time's, you have a timer. Once it's going off and time's up, you take the jar out of the canner or the pot, and you place it on a towel to let it cool. When that happens, you can go ahead and seal off that mason jar. And while they're cooling, the the molecules are going to be trying to suck themselves back in. But because you have a gasket that's been heated around that mason jar, the air can't go back in, but it was able to escape. So as it's cooling, it's a very common thing. You'll listen for the pop, where the lid actually gets sucked down into the jar. And it's really fun to listen to. You'll just be sitting off to the side, and they'll be like pop, 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 depending on how many you have. And but the science behind it is basically without that excess amount of air, it's very hard for certain types of fungus, molds, and pathogens to spread because they can't really breathe. Most of these things require CO2, oxygen, something. So a lot of times, if you have mold or anything, you probably didn't jar it correctly, um, or you weren't sterile in your technique. You didn't wash the jars, or something like that. It's normally something really simplistic. So that's pretty much all there is to jarring. Like I said, depending on what you're cooking, you may have to make the mix a little bit more acidic, or different temperature, different times, things that you can easily Google and come up with a quick recipe to get started. That's the science behind it. Now, like I said, we do jarring, but we also have a dehydrator. Now, the dehydrator is one of the most underrated systems I've ever known of. And the reason I say that is because I dehydrate so much food here. Um, when food ultimately has like an expiration date. Now, this doesn't mean you can take bad food and make it better, but you can extend the life on it. So, say this cucumber, when it was picked. Now, I know this is yellow, it is so overripe, and it has like you'd see some of our chickens got into it, but I'm just gonna let it dry. It's part of a seeding project we're trying out, see how it does. Um, but take this cucumber, right? Uh, Basically it was in a wet form traditionally when I got it. Very juicy. And say it was green. Normally, first thing you're gonna do with it is you're going to put it on your counter for a few days. Why? Because once you put it in a cold environment, it'll begin to degrade faster. Um, and it also depends on your environment. If it's hot, you need to put it in the fridge. Don't leave it on the counter. The cucumbers are a little bit more sensitive to the temperature and humidity around them. But if stored appropriately, they could be put on the counter for a day or two. And anyways, after you put it in the fridge, it's only going to last a few more days. If you were to put it in the freezer, it would last a little bit longer. Dehydration can last years. And of course, as always, we'll do videos on how-tos later on. This is just going to be the sciencing behind it. Now, like I said earlier, this is our planting schedule we go by. So essentially, we get a whole lot of food at once, in theory. So if you were to get a bunch of cucumbers, you can only jar so much. So just like in the garden's biodiversity, we try to do the same thing in terms of our storage. So we'll take and we'll make some, we'll store some cucumbers, we'll make some pickles. Um, Maybe we'll dehydrate it. It really just depends on what we're trying to use it for. Um, these are predominantly better for canning, but take something like carrots, okra. Ooh, okra. Tomatoes. Believe it or not, tomatoes is a really good one. The reason is, so take carrots for example. You can take and use like an air fryer or a fryer, make chips out of some of them. You can freeze them. You can dry them. You can um, powder them as well. You can freeze dry them. Trying to think. You can jar them, like almost like baby carrots, kind of like in a can, canned carrots. Okra, that's actually one of my favorites. I love to dehydrate that, and the reason is so traditionally when you make gumbos and stuff, your okra comes out a touch slimy. You can stop that. All you have to do is dehydrate it, and then you rehydrate it in whatever you're cooking. So you can actually add seasoning, and it'll take on that excess flavor, but still taste like okra. It just takes out that slimy factor because it allows it to break down. I read that the other day, and it mind blowing. I tried it. Um, we haven't rehydrated any yet, but it is phenomenally easier to store in a dry form. Also, dried foods, you can fit more food in a certain space without really losing the nutritional value behind it. And they last longer. So they have their place in the kitchen and in the homestead. Now tomatoes, on the other hand, these are my favorite because I mean, you can do anything with these things. You can freeze them, you can jar them, you can make them into a paste, you can make them into a sauce. You can dehydrate them. You can make sun-dried tomatoes as an accent. So in some of the like French style cuisines and stuff, you can actually, or other areas as well. You can take the tomato slices, cover them in salt, and traditionally it was done in the sun, but ultimately you could put it in a dehydrator, and they're called sun-dried tomatoes. So those have a very unique flavor. They're a very great accent, and when cooked onto something, they soften up, but they keep their original slightly ugly form, but they taste phenomenal, and they're like a tomato, it, but they taste more like a jerky, and then they have like a nice little salt bite to them when they're dried. I've eaten the dried ones. I just haven't eaten the rehydrated versions yet, but they're very good. Now you can also take dehydrated tomato, just take big slices or cubes or whatever, dehydrate it, blend it, and turn it into a tomato powder. And now you can make pastes, sauces, and I mean it takes a lot of tomatoes to make, you know, the uh the powder. And the powder goes a long way. So it's a very efficient storing method, and then you can just kind of rehydrate it, cook it in, make sauces out of it and stuff. I don't have all of the recipes for it yet, but like I said, we'll do videos on all that later on. I just mostly wanted to kind of cover this with you guys. And I don't know if y'all have ever been to Walmart, but I love the Terra Preta chips. Basically, they're root vegetables and stuff that are, like air fried. Um, that way, they're a lot healthier for you, and they are a lot healthier. We also make a lot of our chips and stuff here. But the point is like those are very efficient methods to store, what you have overall. So take okra for example. I would probably traditionally use up some of the okra, dry some for seed pods, um, and then I would freeze some, refrigerate some, dry some, just kind of diversify everything and try to put excess in the fridge and freezer. So that way before they go bad. So say they've been in the freezer for I don't know, a month or a few months and they're fine. They're not lacking in flavor or anything. It's just they're starting to reach an area to where maybe they're in the way or whatever. I can now defrost those cooked okra because you need to blanch it before you throw it in the freezer. and which is just quick boiling basically. Um, but basically, I could take that, dehydrate, or dehydrate it once it's you know defrosted, and now I can store that in a jar, and I don't even need to run it through a canner. I can just seal off the lid, and it's fine. It'll be fine for almost another year. Uh, Now, dehydrated foods, sometimes it is best to seal them. So what I would like to eventually start doing is we have the vacuum sealer for the vacuum sealing bags. I would actually like to get the extension for the mason jars. So what for it's for dehydrated food. So in this case, if I was to dehydrate the okra to allow an extended store time, you hook it up. It's like in a little attachment. You hook up your vacuum sealer and it sucks all the air. The same thing that canning would do, give or take. It's not exactly, but same concept. Um, it's not as efficient because one's sucking out and one's forcing the air out physically and then drawing it back, creating that popping action. But in terms of dry food storage, vacuum sealing would be the way to go for me, because it's a cheap attachment. It's not something that would be a high investment, which means everybody could jump in on it. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, outside of like freeze drying, like I said, I don't really want to go that route. I feel like that's a little bit excessive for what we're doing. And freeze drying for me is kind of in between dehydrated food and jarring. And for me, the investment is well more than what jarring would cost us on a continuous scale using it throughout the year. So like I said, that's pretty much it, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment so we can have some more Q&As with you guys. And again, if you ever need to get in contact, maybe you're a farm, you just want a little bit of um, verbal help, or if you would like me to come out and maybe even test your soil, not an actual soil test, but just kind of look at it, maybe see what it needs, maybe see if your crop rotations, just advice in general. Feel free to hit me up at hippieorganics@yahoo.com, and we will see you guys on the next video. Be kind out there, be safe, and have a great day.